Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is me, Mysterious Cameraman, and today we're going to be talking about DC Legends of Tomorrow Season 7 and if it is still good. So we're going to be going through the 13 episodes of this new season. We're going to be talking about each episode, and then I might give my overall thoughts on the whole season, and then in a few days I'm going to be doing my full show, each season ranking of the show, because it's daily videos in July. So, unlike how I kind of just talk about the season, in this I kind of talk about each individual episode because I don't think it's as good. That simple. Okay, we're going to be beginning with episode 1, The Bullet Blondes. I'll say, I don't love the premise of this season. I've heard very interesting things about it. I think it's better than Season 6. I'll say that. I hated Season 6. I think Season 6 was pretty bad. This season did some better stuff. I think this season was a little more rounded. It had a plot, but I still didn't love it. I'll say I don't think anything that this season even compares to the first 5 seasons. I think each of the 5 seasons were just better simply because the cast was way more solid. And I think Season 6 the worst season. This, I think, is the second worst season. This could beat Season 4 if some stuff was done, but I think there's more redeemable factors of Season 4 than this. We're going to go through the episodes now. Season 7, Episode 1. I think this season's good. I really do. This episode, I think, does a lot of interesting things. At this point in the season, I didn't know that 5 episodes were going to be spent in the 1920s, but I actually do like that they do take some time in this era. I just feel like they take it too long. But I actually don't hate this episode. I think this episode's actually pretty solid. It does some very interesting things. Episode 2, The Need for Speed. I didn't like this either. I just didn't hate this episode. I feel like this episode kind of feels like the continuation of the first one, which isn't a bad thing. But I just didn't love it either. I think this episode was kind of just decent at the end of the day. Episode 3, I'm not even going to try to pronounce an episode name. This was, I think, probably the best episode of the season. This episode was very strong, I'll say. I really enjoyed seeing... I will say, I didn't love the fact that it was Astra and Spooner seeing the old cast members. I would have loved if they somehow made it so it was like Sarah and Nate or something. But it was still fun to see, like, Hawkman. I was happy to see him back. I was excited to see Captain Cold. I was so excited to see Rip Hunter, because I think anyone who knows me knows how much I love that character. And I love how they did bring the characters back. I thought it was fun. I just wish it was with the actors who knew those characters, because it doesn't work. Like, kind of how in The Flash, when Barry, there was one of the episodes when he was meeting all of the old people. I think it was when he met Oliver. I think that's what I'm referring to. I could be thinking of a different episode. But when he meets up with Oliver and he sees him again, that moment is so good, but it wouldn't have worked nearly as well if it was, like, excess in that episode. Like, it has to be the characters who know them, so then we could get a scene with Nate and Sarah, or Sarah and Ray, and have them talk. Like, it makes it so it's not just cameos, and it's more like, oh wow, we're getting these characters one last time. So episode 4, Speakeasy, does it. I'll say this episode was good. I just didn't love it. I think it was like middle of the road. Episode 7, it's a mad scientist. I thought this episode was better than the last one. I still didn't love it. I'll say it did have some good moments, though. This episode did definitely have some good moments. I just didn't love it, and I think it felt, compared to how slow the first 3 episodes were, this episode really rushed from Chicago to New York. Like, it really didn't take any stops. Episode 6, Deus Ex Latrina. I actually did like this one. I did actually think this one was pretty solid. I didn't love Bishop at all in this season. I think he was an unnecessary character. I did like his part in the season makes sense, sure. I just didn't love his character. This character just wasn't great in my opinion. But I did like what they did with this episode. It was fun. And I liked how they made the decisions. Like, I thought this episode was actually done very well. Episode 7, A Woman's Place is in the War Effort. I'll say this was actually a really good episode. I didn't love it. I'll say I think everything with Bishop is kind of like, I feel like the Bishop side plot with Behrad and Nate was kind of really unnecessary, because it makes Bishop a worse character. I think they wanted Bishop to be like this likable guy, but he really wasn't. Like, it's just a very odd, I feel like this episode was kind of unnecessary, but I didn't hate it either, actually. I think this episode felt thought out, which I feel like many episodes of Legends, especially since season 5, have not felt thought out. So I am happy that this episode was pretty solid. Like, it felt like it had a plot. I just didn't love it. Episode 8, Paranoid Android. I actually did like this one pretty much. I didn't love it, I'll say, but I actually didn't hate it either. I think what this episode did was a lot of really fun stuff with the other team and how they're discovering that they're androids. I just think that the way that once they discover it, I feel like it kind of doesn't go anywhere. So I didn't love it, and I feel like it was a little odd, and it was a waste of an episode, but I didn't hate it. I just didn't love it. Episode 9, Lowest Common Denominator. I actually didn't hate this one either. This episode, I really liked the camera work in it. I'll say I feel like the way they did the stuff with the 90s crew, I really liked how they were using the camera work, and I thought it was kind of fun, the premise of the episode. I just don't think it was interesting enough to carry the episode, I'll say. Episode 10, The Fixed Point. I think this was actually probably one of the best episodes of the season. I loved the idea. I think the 1914 era, I think first is just very fun. But I think the idea, the premise of this episode being like there's this fixed point that no one can fix, and it's like this bar and they're watching it. I think it's such a fun idea for the episode. I think that especially how important this fixed point is, and how she makes a deal with Thawne. I think that was this episode, or maybe that was Race Against the Machines. No, that was this episode. That was this episode. This was when we met Thawne, I think. I liked this episode. I'm just going to quickly check if this was the one where we met Thawne. I'm almost certain it was. Yep, it is. I really enjoyed this episode, actually. I thought it did a lot of interesting things. And this was definitely one of the most interesting episodes they've done. Episode 11, Race Against the Machines. This was another good episode. I think the idea of the fixed point is very good, and I like the legends going up against themselves. I like the ways they were planning and things like that. I thought this episode was done very well. It was very interesting. I just didn't love some of the stuff that was done, and I also don't think I'm very much sold on Astra, Spooner, or Nuzari, or Gwen for that matter. I think this season really just doesn't have the strongest cast, and they're really trying to sell it. Episode 12, Too Legit to Quit. I actually did like this idea. I really like the idea that they look into their future and they see what they're going to do. I thought that was actually very creative. I just didn't love how it was executed, I'll say. I guess that's how you could say it. I don't hate this episode by any means. I just feel like it could have been done. It was done very interesting. I just think Evil Gideon isn't a very interesting villain. I feel like they've had good villains for most of Legends, besides from Bishop. And I think Bishop isn't a bad villain. I think he fits Legends well. I just don't think he's a very interesting antagonist. But I actually do like Bishop as the villain of Legends specifically. And I also think the demon in Season 4, Malice, I think, or was Malice Season 3, I don't remember. But whichever it was, I actually enjoyed a lot of that. But I did like this episode. I just don't think Evil Gideon's a very interesting villain. And in episode 13, Knocked Down, Knocked Up, I actually didn't hate this episode. I didn't love it either. It didn't feel like a season finale. I'll say that. It felt like an important episode, sure, but it felt like this felt like a mid-season finale. And it was episode 13. This episode really should have been the mid-season finale, not the finale. That was a very interesting decision, I will say. I was a little confused why this was the finale, especially with this being the series finale. Like, they introduced Booster Gold and stuff, and they did some, like, they're, like, all going to prison now, and I just didn't fully understand it, but, yeah. Overall, I didn't like this season that much. I think Evil Gideon isn't an interesting antagonist, I'll say, and this season really did have a lot of antagonists. It had Hoover, and then it had Evil Gideon, and also had Bishop for a little bit. Like, it just didn't, I don't feel like it knew what it wanted to do. And I think an AI being the villain doesn't work for Legends. Like, I think the aliens were worse, sure. But I think at least in the finale, they had an over... Like, the finale at least had it, like, it made sense what the finale was doing. I'll say, I feel like once the finale hit, I was like, oh, okay, so this makes sense. Here, I don't feel like it. I feel like Gary and Gideon being together is just weird. And I feel like the writers, specifically in this season, really are overplaying the characters that don't matter. Like, Spooner, Astra, Gideon, Gary. Like, they're putting characters in a spotlight that I don't feel like should be in the spotlight. What I loved about this final episode is a character like Nate was finally put in the spotlight. And yes, his whole suit got corroded and stuff. So, like, sure, I think it could have been cool if we saw him in other things, but this should have been a mid-season finale. I'll say that again. But I think I think Nate should have been the main character, or at least a leading character in the show. I think in this season they should have brought back Flannel Zari for this season. I don't know why they are obsessed with Influencer Zari rather than Flannel Zari, because I don't think she's nearly as interesting. But I think if they made Nate and Zari prominent characters in the show, which I think they try to do at times, but I feel like they're not the same characters that they were. I think the idea of Nate and him being a historian was done so well, especially in season 2. Season 2 and 3, he was like really a huge character on the team. But then in this season, it's kind of like, well, or in the past few seasons, he's kind of just been this doofus who punches things almost. Like, he lost his historian, the part of him that made him so valuable for the Legends, that made him like feel separate from them. And I think in the earlier seasons that was done so well, especially when he had characters to bounce off of like Ray and stuff. But now they just don't. And I feel like that's a waste. Like, they could have brought in, instead of bringing Gwyn back with Constantine, they could have brought in like a really good cast member for the season and like done something interesting so they could elevate the characters that haven't been elevated in a while. But yeah, let's do our top 3 episodes of the season. Okay, I'd say in third place is probably Race Against the Machine. No. Yep, actually probably Race Against the Machines. I didn't like that many episodes this season, so that's kind of like the place it just kind of falls. I'd say second place is The Fixed Point. I really enjoyed this episode, actually. I was very invested. And in first place is going to be, by far, Withered Ever 100 Not Found, or whatever it's called, episode 3. Just a solid episode. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.